Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Fight Club seems to be one of those films that divides everyone. It's either everything that's wrong with masculinity or it's what's missing in the world today, and it's just lads being lads. The reason it's on my mind is because I rewatched it a few nights ago, and I've got to say, I felt like I was watching the film with fresh eyes. I seemed to come away with a completely different and profound impression of the movie than I had before. So, if you've got some time to kill, sit yourself down for my take on Fight Club, the spiritual journey of boys in a world without men. And of course, spoilers ahead. The film opens with our narrator, I'll just call him Jack from here on in. He's suffering from insomnia and is sleepwalking through his perfectly monotonous and predictable life, slowly checking all the materialistic boxes he believes will make his life complete. In order to get rid of his insomnia, he starts going to meetings with people with chronic or otherwise debilitating diseases, and he's cured. Because of the change in his environment, and by being in the company of those who are, in a sense, free to do whatever they want because they have nothing left to lose, he gets a glimpse of who he could be, but for the time being seems content to merely experience the reality of mortality from a safe distance. It's almost as if how I was watching the film instead of meditating on or directly working towards my goals. Now, Jack comfortably lived his life with ever so slight discomfort until Marla starts attending the same meetings. Like him, she doesn't have any of the ills of the others, and is a constant reminder of his own dishonesty with not only the groups but with himself. She is that little voice in his head telling him that everything's not okay, and serves as something of a catalyst to his own spiritual awakening. I'm going to talk about the moral scenes first, as I feel they're often overlooked in favour of the exciting Tyler sections, but they offer, I think, key insights into Jack's childhood and his underlying desires, which drive some other parts of the film. Don't worry, I still have plenty to say about Tyler later on. So Jack starts talking to Marlo. You can see that he isn't directly pursuing her, but there are cracks in this facade, such as he gives her his phone number on pretty shaky reasoning. Oh, we might need to exchange nights. We know what you're up to, and he starts seeing her in lieu of his spirit animal. It's she's inside his head. He wants a connection with her, if only on a subconscious level. He's directly avoiding a relationship due to the lack of a stable family as a kid, and perhaps unresolved trauma that he's fostered as a consequence. He associates relationships and being emotional as bad. This may explain why he made a very comfortable and emotionally flat life for himself, even going so far as at one point to say that the IKEA catalogue is his version of a porno. Despite this, there's still some small part of him that wishes for a real relationship. When Jack's apartment is destroyed, the first person he calls is Marla, but he promptly hangs up and calls Tyler, which indicates that he has this initial knee-jerk reaction. He still feels more at ease with men than he does with women. Men don't tend to rock the boat, emotionally speaking. It's a very safe environment for him to be in. Later on, when Tyler and Marla begin seeing each other, Jack, who before claimed to have no interest in Marla, is now very clearly jealous. It's only by Tyler just going with the flow and not thinking too deeply about things before he does them, he just acts on impulse, that he's able to lead Jack to deeper revelations about himself. It's only through taking deliberate and measured steps into the unknown that we are able to figure out our own place in the world. Now, Jax is still in outward denial of his feelings for Marla, starts to treat her with general hostility and resentment whenever she shows up. But it's interesting how at one point he notes that the relationship between Tyler and Marla is identical to that of his parents, which is showing that not only Jack but also Tyler have this. Even though Tyler is the personification of everything that Jack wants to be, he still has these childhood issues that he can't quite get over. Just that kind of thing, your parents define you, and it's very hard to get out of that cycle. And that might be what's inhibiting him from having a mature relationship now. Tyler's attraction to Marla is almost entirely sexual and seems to be a manifestation of how how Jack wants to connect with Marla on a deep level, but is currently incapable of doing so, possibly because that side of him wasn't nurtured as a child. It's like he never quite grew out of the whole pulling the pigtails of the girl you like phase. What he fails to recognise at this point of the film is that by avoiding a proper relationship with Marla as Jack, he's not pushing himself where he needs to be pushed, and is instead only focusing in developing his masculinity. Now, at the start of the film, this was a necessary action, as Jack's world was robbed of any meaningful purpose and growth, of any desire to build something greater than himself. But Everyone has to have masculine and feminine parts of themselves. Generally, men are more masculine and women are more feminine, but there are exceptions. And the point is, if you're centered, then it shouldn't matter where you end up falling on the spectrum. The point is for you to figure out your center by yourself and not listen to where anyone tells you it should be. During the film, Tyler is telling Jack to go 100% masculine, which Jack starts to reject once his center point has been passed. It's only towards the end of the film that Jack fully reaches out to Marla, showing that he's centered with regard to his masculinity and that he appreciates the presence of femininity in the interest of forming a larger whole. In this way, he manages to rise above his parents' dysfunctional relationship and find his true equilibrium. With all that in mind, let's talk about Tyler Durden. As those of you who've seen the film will already know, Tyler is a manifestation of Jack's imagination. He is who Jack wants to be, but also who Jack feels he needs to become in order to be truly at one with himself. Tyler serves as the older brother or father figure that Jack never had, who ideally should have been there to guide and control his growth into a fully functional adult. Without such direction in his life, and at his wits' end from the never-ending emotional suppression of himself by society and by Jack, Tyler, a manifestation of Jack's subconscious shadow, has taken it upon himself to initiate Jack into the world of adults and of real men, real masculinity. So after destroying Jack's apartment and emphasizing over some beers that Jack's previous life of accumulating things in order to fill out the ideal lifestyle in the eyes of society was pointless, he agrees to let Jack move in with him, but on one condition: I want you to hit me as hard as you can. With his one request made at Jack's weakest point, Tyler invites Jack to step over the edge, to force him to be present, to rely on his raw, untamed emotional side, and to actively seek spiritual growth in the face of the unknown. This desire of Tyler's to have Jack live in the present when things get uncomfortable, brought up several more times in the film, especially when Tyler burns Jack's hand and when he drives on the wrong side of the road to make him finally face his mortality. All of this is to force Jack to work through his emotions and to come to deeper realizations about himself, ones that will help him to center himself. With Jack's first punch, he begins this descent to rock bottom to just slide and find his equilibrium, allowing him to finally emerge as a well-rounded adult. As film progresses and Jack continues his slide while living in Tyler's rundown but somehow still livable house, where it's evident just how little of what he couldn't survive without a month ago, he actually needs to survive day to day. As this happens, other estranged men become attracted to Jack and Tyler's fights in the car park. It's clear that this is something that men everywhere are lacking, and so begins Fight Club, a place where men can fully express themselves in a raw and physical way. Away from the judging and unsleeping eye of the man, these boys who never really grew up can connect with a part of themselves desperate to be let out and nurtured. As Fight Club progresses, Tyler continues to push the members over their edge. It's here that Tyler's grand vision starts to embody the oppressive and rigid system he hates so much and wants Jack to escape from. It's now not enough for the members of Fight Club to be free. Everyone else must be freed, whether they like it or not. Project Mayhem, in a sense, is just a general middle finger to everyone in society with no real end game whatsoever. But it's from this point that Jack is not entirely on board with Tyler's doing, but begins to be resentful at Tyler for not including him in it. Tyler is probably leaving Jack out specifically because Jack isn't on board with it, and like the imagined mentor he is, he goes about creating a world in which Jack can flourish, but at the same time tries to protect Jack from the consequential messiness that will inevitably ensue in the transition from one world to the next. But it's in these attempts by the subconscious, just Tyler, to hide possible revelations from the conscious Jack, it prevents the soul from reaching its true equilibrium. In trying to save Jack, he's now become another obstacle for Jack to overcome in order to truly find himself. This road to salvation that he's on only comes from taking full responsibility for his inner world and seeing the outer one as clearly as possible. But this is where the other men taking part in Project Mayhem and Fight Club fall short of their potential. Once they're committed full-time to Tyler's plan, they are christened as his space monkeys and subjected to a bombardment of propaganda, returning them to, in a sense, to the life of servitude that they tried to escape. It's arguable that as their life is now more masculine than before, they're in a spiritually healthier position. They've traded sort of dull corporate jobs and underground street fighting for anti-corporate guerrilla warfare. They're now organized, and they've got a real purpose that they believe in, or they think they do, and Eventually, they have the opportunity to start their lives anew by destroying everyone's credit records. The problem is that they're not who they truly want to be. A very telling sign is when, for instance, in the scene where Tyler's driving on the wrong side of the road, he asks the space monkeys in the back what they want to do before they die, and they both answer immediately. They know what they want to do, but as Tyler points out later on, most people don't have the courage to do what they want without any fears of failure or embarrassment. They still need that father or authority figure in their life in order to fully develop. But Tyler's sadly is ultimately only interested in using them to build a better world for Jack and himself. The final straw for Jack is when Project Mayhem results in the death of Bob, his friend from his previous life. His own brush with death from Tyler driving the wrong side of the road, coupled with the death of Bob, is enough of a reminder of his mortality to allow him to find his center. It allows him to frame what's important in his life, which at this point is stopping Project Mayhem and making sure that Marla is safe. Although he fails at the former, and at the end all the credit records are blown up anyway, he finally rids himself of Tyler, shooting himself in the head with surgical precision, which we're not going to go into. So, to summarize, my main takeaway from Fight Club is one of equilibrium. You need to find your edge, and as David Data elaborates on in his book The Way of the Superior Man, you need to constantly seek to tip yourself over that edge. If you don't do it willingly, you will create some discord between what your conscious thinks you want and what your subconscious wants to do. That is until your subconscious drags your conscious, kicking and screaming, into a more suitable but spiritually healthy reality, but the process of which isn't going to be pretty. You're going to be dragged as opposed to having a nice leisurely stroll through your journey that is life. Although seeking spiritual enlightenment should be one of your main goals in life, it can be a tightrope act between your happiness and that of those around you. So you may need to cut down on your rampant shopping sprees, but domestic terrorism may be a step too far, and you might recommend trying out less extreme ways of finding yourself before you go to, blowing shit up. I think that the journey of Jack and not on the other end, but even Marla to a certain extent, is all necessary because they lacked wise and selfless mentors as children. They are essentially just 30-year-old latchkey children. In this setting, or in this world that they find themselves in, their extreme actions could be justified as an attempt to center themselves and society as a whole, which has failed their generation in a very real and evident sense. But I do feel it has to be emphasised that Fight Club should be seen as a film about growth, and it's a means to an end. A means which shouldn't have to be carried out in order to meet that end. But the whole point is not an end in and of itself. You shouldn't be spending your days in worship of Tyler Durden and being overly masculine just for the sake of it. This is immature and dangerous. This kind of behaviour is the one that feminists point out when they talk about toxic masculinity, and to be honest, I can't really argue with them. Just this loud and aggressive masculinity without any purpose. But the problem is that feminists don't take much care in differentiating between aggressiveness and assertiveness, between weak but loud masculinity and strong but sure masculinity. They all get lumped into the same pile and cut out of boys' personalities with equal discrimination. This isn't good because then boys aren't in touch with themselves properly. Then they're disconnected from themselves. They're going to turn towards your Tyler Durdens, and the cycle begins anew. I would personally argue that none of these are right. Take the moderate path, take the quieter but surer path. It's one thing to lash out and burn down the world in absence of guidance and mentors, but it's another one to strike out a new path, one where you can become the mentors for the next generation. There's a quote that I hear a lot, but it seems to be getting more true by the day, which is strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men. I think it's pretty safe to say that we're in hard times at the moment, not even just with the coronavirus, but just with the stagnation of society in a way. that, if you want things to keep on going, I mean, the current generations do need to really, to hate to use the term, really pull up the bootstraps and just get on with it however well they could, how well they can, however they need to. On the kind of path that I envision, it would be one which would seek out ways to find balance between control and chaos in your life, between masculinity and femininity. It would require a good deal of understanding of self before attempting to discover truth in the larger world, as sort of deep set biases can result to less than honest conclusions about the world and more problems down the line. It is by no means easy, and only having started maybe a little over a month ago, I would be hypocritical to not point out that it's hard to just find the sort of path for yourself and stick to it without having anyone to really show you the way from a young age. I think the key is not to see any point of your life as a destination or to ever feel that you're finished. There's always more you can become. There's always more to learn. The world is too big for anyone to fully understand. But as long as you keep an open mind and are open to growth, you will eventually find at least a few sort of deeper truths that underlie society through through trial and error, but you'll hopefully understand them well enough to pass them on to the next generation. With the internet, it's never been easier to access all this such a wealth, such a treasure trove of knowledge and information, and I think it should be everyone's responsibility to try and condense as much as possible so the essentials can be passed on. Find those little kernels of wisdom in just the avalanche of data that we're exposed to. We don't get to choose the world that we're born into, but we do get a say in the one we leave behind. And the first rule of Project Mentor is you must ask questions. So those are my thoughts on Fight Club. I hope you enjoyed them. I'm sure I missed out some things here and there. But if there are any holes in the perspective that I put forward, please do leave a comment below. If there's one thing I love about these kind of films, it's how different people can just watch them and become away with completely different views about them. It really highlights how perception of reality differs from person to person. Just something to keep in mind. So until next time, keep growing.